The Young and the Restless spoilers. Nick's shocking discovery changes everything forever, while Diane's rescue turns into a deadly trap. What if the moment Nick Newman believed he had finally moved on from Phyllis became the exact moment that shattered his self-control? What if one unexpected glance revealed a passionate secret that could change multiple lives forever? And while Nick struggled with emotions he thought he had buried long ago, another crisis was unfolding across Genoa City as Kyle Abbott raced against time to rescue his mother before it was too late. But neither man realized they were walking straight into carefully planned traps. One mistake, one unexpected visitor, and one shocking betrayal could leave several lives hanging in the balance. Stay with us until the very end, because today's story connects every major storyline in ways no one saw coming. Nick Newman had spent weeks convincing himself that his feelings for Phyllis Summers belonged in the past. Their relationship had survived heartbreak, betrayal, forgiveness, and countless second chances. Even after everything they had experienced together, Nick believed the healthiest decision was to leave the past behind and focus on protecting his family. But emotions rarely disappear as easily as people hope. Across town, Phyllis couldn't stop thinking about her recent conversation with Matt Clark. Unlike everyone else in Genoa City, Matt hadn't judged her for her complicated history. Instead, he listened carefully, understood the mistakes she regretted, and spoke to her with unexpected kindness. For someone who constantly felt misunderstood, that simple respect meant more than she wanted to admit. Matt knew exactly how to keep the conversation comfortable without pushing too hard. He wasn't pretending to be perfect. In fact, he openly admitted he had made terrible mistakes throughout his life. That honesty made Phyllis lower her guard little by little. She wasn't ready to call it love. She wasn't even sure she trusted him completely. But she couldn't deny that she enjoyed being around him. Meanwhile, Victor Newman remained focused on a completely different problem. Matt had agreed to quietly monitor Cane Ashby's activities, but Victor trusted very few people. He believed redemption only mattered when it was proven through actions. Until Matt delivered real information, Victor intended to keep watching every move he made. Nick understood his father's concerns, yet he hoped Matt had genuinely changed. Noah wasn't nearly as optimistic. "You almost died because of that man," Noah reminded Nick during a private conversation. "People like him don't suddenly become someone else." Nick wanted to believe everyone deserved another chance. Still, something about Matt continued to bother him. Elsewhere, Cane Ashby couldn't ignore Matt's strange confession at society. Claiming to be Victor's informant sounded almost too convenient. Cane had built his reputation by recognizing manipulation long before anyone else noticed it. If Matt truly worked for Victor, why admit it so openly? And if he wasn't telling the truth, who exactly was he working for? Those questions stayed in Cane's mind long after their meeting ended. At the Abbott mansion, Jack Abbott struggled to remain calm despite the overwhelming pressure surrounding Diane's disappearance. Every hour without answers increased the danger. Kyle Abbott refused to waste another minute waiting. If Dr. Laurence Markham really was holding Diane captive, Kyle intended to bring her home himself. Jack understood the risk. But as a father, he also understood Kyle's determination. Neither of them realized Patty Williams was becoming more unpredictable with every passing hour. Patty believed fate had finally given her another chance to rewrite history. Anyone who stood between her and that dream would quickly become an enemy. Back at Crimson Lights, Phyllis tried convincing herself that meeting Matt for coffee was nothing more than two adults getting to know each other. Yet she noticed something surprising. She was smiling. Not because Matt had flirted with her. Not because he complimented her. She smiled because for the first time in a long while, someone looked at her without reminding her of every mistake she had ever made. Matt noticed it too. "You deserve more happiness than you allow yourself," he quietly told her. Phyllis laughed softly. "Most people would disagree. I'm not most people." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Sometimes silence revealed more than words ever could. Across the room, an unexpected customer walked through the front door. Nick Newman. He hadn't planned on stopping for coffee. He had only intended to grab a quick drink before heading back to Newman Enterprises. Instead, his eyes landed directly on Phyllis and Matt. Neither of them noticed him. Nick watched as Matt gently reached across the table. Phyllis didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed him to hold her hand. The sight hit Nick much harder than he expected. He reminded himself they were both free to make their own choices. Still, why did it feel like someone had punched him in the stomach? Nick quietly turned away before either of them noticed his presence. He told himself walking away proved he had matured. But inside, old emotions were beginning to wake up. Across town, Kyle prepared for the most dangerous mission of his life. Armed with only the information Jack had managed to uncover, Kyle carefully studied every possible entrance to Dr. Markham's heavily protected property. Security cameras. Locked gates. Large Dobermans. Nothing about this rescue would be easy. Even Diane, trapped inside the isolated house, sensed time was running out. She had secretly prepared her own desperate plan. If Dr. Markham returned before Kyle arrived, she might have only one opportunity to fight back. One mistake could cost her everything. As evening settled over Genoa City, multiple lives unknowingly moved toward the same night that would change them forever. Nick struggled to control feelings he thought had disappeared. Phyllis found herself growing closer to a man almost everyone warned her about. Victor quietly watched from the shadows, waiting to learn whether Matt's loyalty was genuine. Jack desperately tried to buy Kyle enough time. And Kyle stepped into the darkness, unaware that someone else was already waiting inside the property. By sunrise, relationships would be tested. Secrets would explode. And one shocking confrontation would leave Genoa City wondering whether anyone could ever trust Matt Clark again. Kyle Abbott remained hidden behind a line of thick trees overlooking Dr. Laurence Markham's isolated estate. The property was even more intimidating than he had imagined. High security lights swept across the yard every few seconds, while two massive Dobermans patrolled the grounds with constant vigilance. Every instinct told Kyle that one careless move would end the rescue before it even began. He took a slow breath and reminded himself why he had come. His mother was somewhere inside that house. No matter how dangerous the situation became, walking away was never an option. Inside the mansion, Diane Jenkins Abbott was fighting her own battle. Every minute felt like an hour as she waited for an opportunity to escape. She had secretly slipped a powerful sedative into one of Dr. Markham's favorite meals, hoping he would return hungry and careless. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it might be the only chance she would ever have. Unfortunately, fate had different ideas. Just as Kyle quietly crossed the outer fence, Dr. Markham glanced at his phone while driving back toward the estate. Jack Abbott's suspicious text message continued bothering him. Something about Patty's supposed emergency simply didn't make sense. Years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts. Instead of driving straight to the meeting place, he turned his car around. His destination was home. Meanwhile, Jack Abbott faced a crisis of his own. Patty Williams had finally managed to grab her phone. The moment she read the messages, her expression changed completely. "You lied to me," she whispered. Jack attempted to stay calm. "I was trying to protect everyone." "No," Patty answered coldly. "You were trying to protect Diane." The room suddenly felt much smaller. Jack recognized the dangerous look in Patty's eyes. It wasn't simple anger anymore. It was betrayal mixed with obsession, the same unstable combination that had destroyed countless lives before. Patty slowly backed away. "You still choose Diane." Before Jack could stop her, Patty rushed toward the door. He immediately realized where she was going. If Patty reached Dr. Markham before Kyle found Diane, everything could collapse. Back across town, Nick Newman couldn't stop replaying what he had witnessed at Crimson Lights. Seeing Matt hold Phyllis's hand shouldn't have affected him so deeply. Yet it did. He kept asking himself the same question. Why him? After everything Matt had done throughout his life, why would Phyllis trust someone like that? Nick finally admitted something he had refused to acknowledge for months. He still cared. Whether it was love, jealousy, or simple protectiveness, the emotions were impossible to ignore. Unable to concentrate, Nick drove toward society, hoping a quiet dinner might clear his thoughts. Instead, fate delivered another surprise. Inside the restaurant, Matt and Phyllis were already sharing dinner. Neither of them noticed Nick entering. The conversation between them flowed naturally. Matt wasn't trying to impress her anymore. He simply listened while Phyllis laughed about old memories, embarrassing mistakes, and the complicated relationships that had shaped her life. For the first time in years, Phyllis looked completely relaxed. Matt admired that. "You spent so much of your life trying to survive," he said softly. "Maybe it's time someone helped you simply enjoy living." Phyllis looked down at the table. "No one has ever said that to me." Matt smiled. "Then everyone else has been blind." Across the room, Nick's frustration continued building. He wanted to leave. Instead, he stayed. Every smile between them felt like another reminder that Phyllis was moving forward without him. At Newman Ranch, Victor received unexpected news from one of his private investigators. Matt hadn't reported anything useful about Cane. Not yet. Victor frowned. Either Cane truly wasn't plotting anything, or Matt was hiding information. Victor never ignored possibilities. "Keep watching him," Victor ordered. "If he's playing games, I want to know before anyone else." Elsewhere, Cane Ashby found himself thinking about Matt's strange confession once again. The pieces refused to fit together. A man who openly admitted being a spy usually wasn't telling the whole truth. Cane suspected another player was moving pieces behind the scenes. He simply didn't know who. As darkness settled over the countryside, Kyle finally reached the back entrance of Dr. Markham's property. He carefully avoided the security cameras before forcing open a small service door. Inside, everything was silent. Too silent. Kyle whispered his mother's name. No answer. He searched room after room until he finally heard a faint sound upstairs. "Diane?" A weak voice answered. "Kyle." Relief washed over him. He rushed toward the locked bedroom. On the other side, Diane could hardly believe she was hearing her son's voice. "Kyle, hurry!" He began forcing the lock open. Just one more push. Then the sound every parent fears echoed through the hallway. A door slammed downstairs. Someone had returned. Kyle froze. Diane's heart raced. Dr. Markham wasn't supposed to be back yet. Footsteps echoed through the house. Slow. Calm. Deliberate. Dr. Markham had already realized someone else was inside. At exactly the same moment, Patty's car sped down the highway toward the estate. She wasn't coming to help anyone. She was coming to make sure Diane never escaped. Back at society, Phyllis and Matt stepped outside after dinner. The cool evening air surrounded them. For several quiet moments, neither spoke. Finally, Matt reached for her hand again. This time, Phyllis didn't hesitate. She stepped closer. Their eyes met. Years of loneliness, regret, and hope seemed to disappear. Slowly, Matt leaned forward. Phyllis closed the remaining distance. Their lips met in a passionate kiss neither of them expected to share so soon. Unfortunately, they weren't alone. Standing across the street, hidden in the shadows beside his parked car, Nick Newman watched everything. His expression hardened instantly. The heartbreak disappeared. Only anger remained. Without thinking twice, Nick stepped off the sidewalk and began walking directly toward them. Neither Matt nor Phyllis had any idea the confrontation about to explode would change all three of their lives forever. Nick Newman crossed the street without slowing down. Every step carried months of buried frustration, unanswered questions, and emotions he had tried to ignore. By the time he reached the sidewalk outside society, Matt Clark and Phyllis Summers finally noticed him. The silence was immediate. Phyllis recognized the look on Nick's face before he said a single word. It wasn't simple jealousy. It was disappointment, anger, and concern all mixed together. "So this is what's really going on," Nick said, his voice controlled but cold. Phyllis folded her arms. "Nick, this isn't your business." "The moment you got involved with him," Nick replied, staring directly at Matt, "it became everyone's business." Matt remained calm. "I'm not looking for a fight." Nick took another step forward. "Funny. Trouble always seems to find you." For several tense seconds, no one moved. People leaving the restaurant slowed down, sensing that something serious was unfolding. Phyllis stepped between the two men. "Enough. I'm making my own decisions." Nick looked at her in disbelief. "You're telling me you actually trust him? After everything he's done?" "I know exactly who he was," Phyllis answered. "I'm trying to find out who he is now." Nick shook his head. "People like Matt don't change overnight." Matt finally spoke. "I don't expect anyone to forget my past." "No," Nick replied. "You expect everyone to forgive it." Matt didn't raise his voice. "I expect to earn trust." Nick laughed bitterly. "By dating Phyllis while secretly working around Victor? That's your plan?" For the first time, Matt's expression changed. "So Victor told you?" "He didn't have to tell me much." Nick's eyes never left Matt. "I know you're spying on Cane." Phyllis immediately turned toward Matt. "What is he talking about?" Matt stayed silent. That silence told Phyllis everything. "You never mentioned Victor asked you to do that." "I was going to." "When?" Matt hesitated. "I wanted to explain after I understood everything myself." Phyllis stepped backward. For someone who valued honesty above almost everything else, another hidden secret felt painfully familiar. "You should have trusted me enough to tell me." "I was trying to protect you." "No," she answered quietly. "You were making decisions for me." Before anyone could say another word, Matt's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. One message. Only 3 words. "Problem at Markham's." Matt immediately understood something had gone terribly wrong. Without another explanation, he looked at Nick and Phyllis. "I have to go." Nick blocked his path. "Not this time." Matt's patience finally disappeared. "I said move." Nick refused. One quick shove became another. Then fists started flying. The fight exploded in seconds. Restaurant guests rushed backward as chairs crashed onto the sidewalk. Nick landed the first clean punch. Matt stumbled but recovered almost immediately. Years of surviving difficult situations had taught him how to defend himself. He refused to attack recklessly. Instead, he tried pushing Nick away. But Nick wasn't interested in stopping. Phyllis screamed for both men to quit. Neither listened. Across town, Kyle Abbott had finally forced open the locked bedroom door. The moment Diane saw her son, relief overwhelmed her. Kyle immediately embraced her. "We're getting you out." "There isn't much time," Diane whispered. "Markham's back." They hurried toward the hallway. Then they heard footsteps. Slow. Steady. Coming closer. Dr. Laurence Markham appeared at the opposite end of the corridor. His expression remained strangely calm. "I expected someone eventually." Kyle instinctively stepped in front of Diane. "Stay away from her." Markham smiled. "You've inherited your father's courage." He reached into his pocket. Kyle immediately prepared himself. Instead of pulling out a weapon, Markham pressed a small remote control. Suddenly, loud barking echoed throughout the house. The Dobermans. Kyle's heart sank. Within seconds, the dogs rushed inside through a side entrance. Diane grabbed Kyle's arm. "We can't outrun them." Markham slowly walked closer. "I offered your mother's safety. You kidnapped her. I protected her from people who never appreciated her. Kyle realized arguing was useless. He needed another plan. Back at the Abbott mansion, Jack still couldn't reach Kyle. Every unanswered call increased his fear. Then another call arrived. Victor Newman. I've received reports something unusual is happening near Markham's property. Jack's heart nearly stopped. My son is there. Victor remained silent for several seconds. I'll send security immediately. Meanwhile, Patty Williams pulled her car onto the property. She noticed Markham's vehicle. Then another. Kyle's. A disturbing smile crossed her face. So everyone's finally together. She quietly walked toward the house. Inside, Kyle searched desperately for any escape. Windows were locked. The front entrance was blocked. The Dobermans continued circling. Then Diane remembered something. The basement. What? There's an old service tunnel. Markham's smile disappeared. For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. You found that? Kyle didn't hesitate. He grabbed Diane's hand. Run! They sprinted toward the basement stairs. Markham shouted for the dogs. Chaos erupted. Furniture crashed. Glass shattered. The entire house echoed with barking and footsteps. Outside, Patty heard every sound. Instead of calling for help, she locked the front gate from the outside. No one leaves, she whispered. Back in Genoa City, the fight between Nick and Matt finally ended when several bystanders pulled them apart. Nick's lip was bleeding. Matt's eye had already begun swelling. Phyllis looked at both men with complete disappointment. This solves nothing. Nick pointed directly at Matt. He's hiding something bigger. Matt wiped blood from his face. You don't know the whole story. Then tell us. Matt looked at Phyllis. There was regret in his eyes. I can't. Those two words changed everything. Phyllis stepped away from him. If you can't be honest with me. She paused, struggling to finish the sentence. Then maybe Nick was right. For the first time since they met, Matt realized he might lose the one person who had truly believed he could become someone better. At that exact moment, another urgent message appeared on his phone. They're trapped. Hurry, asterisk asterisk. Matt's face turned pale. Without another explanation, he turned and ran into the night. Nick watched him disappear. What is he hiding? Neither Nick nor Phyllis knew the answer. But before sunrise, they would discover that Matt's biggest secret wasn't connected to Cane. It was connected to a conspiracy far more dangerous than anyone in Genoa City had imagined. The headlights of Matt Clark's car sliced through the darkness as he raced toward Dr. Laurence Markham's estate. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Every second mattered now. The urgent messages he had received confirmed his worst fear. Kyle Abbott had gone in alone, Diane was still trapped, and the entire operation had spiraled out of control. Matt had promised Victor Newman he would quietly gather information, but this was no longer about spying. This was about saving lives. Back at the estate, the underground service tunnel offered Kyle and Diane only a brief advantage. The narrow passage was old, damp, and barely lit by a few flickering emergency lights. Dust filled the air as they hurried deeper into the tunnel. Keep moving, Kyle whispered. Behind them, the barking of the Dobermans echoed through the concrete walls. Dr. Markham wasn't giving up. Neither were the dogs. Diane struggled to keep pace. Weeks of captivity had left her exhausted, but seeing her son beside her gave her strength she didn't know she still possessed. I'm sorry, she whispered. Kyle looked at her in confusion. For what? For letting this happen. Kyle stopped just long enough to place his hands on her shoulders. None of this is your fault. We're getting out together. Before they could continue, the tunnel shook violently. A heavy metal door slammed shut somewhere ahead. Their escape route had just disappeared. Above ground, Patty Williams stood outside the estate watching flashing security lights illuminate the property. Everything was falling apart exactly as she expected. She smiled to herself. "If I can't rewrite the past," she whispered, "no one gets a happy ending." But Patty failed to notice another vehicle entering the property. Victor Newman's private security team had arrived. Several agents quietly surrounded the estate while remaining hidden in the darkness. Inside the tunnel, Kyle searched desperately for another exit. There has to be another way. Diane suddenly remembered something. "When Markham first brought me here, I heard water running." Kyle looked around. "You think there's another tunnel?" "I think this one connects to the old drainage system." It was their only hope. Meanwhile, Jack Abbott refused to remain at home any longer. Ignoring everyone's warnings, he drove straight toward the estate himself. No father could sit still knowing his son was in danger. At the same time, Matt finally reached the property. One of Victor's security officers immediately stopped him. "You can't go inside. I know the layout. We already have people searching." Matt shook his head. "You don't understand." He pointed toward the rear of the estate. "There's an underground access point behind the greenhouse." The security team exchanged quick glances. Matt wasn't guessing. He knew exactly where to look. Without wasting another second, they followed him. Elsewhere, Nick Newman sat alone in his car replaying everything that had happened with Phyllis. The anger had begun fading. In its place came regret. The fight hadn't solved anything. If anything, it had pushed Phyllis even farther away. Then his phone rang. "Victor." "Nick." "What happened?" "Kyle's rescue has gone wrong." Nick's expression changed instantly. "I'm on my way." Within moments, another Newman was racing toward the unfolding disaster. Back inside the tunnel, Kyle finally spotted a rusted maintenance ladder leading upward. He pulled with all his strength until the old hatch finally gave way. Fresh air poured inside. "We made it," Diane whispered. Just as Kyle helped her climb out, Dr. Markham appeared at the opposite end of the tunnel. His calm demeanor had completely vanished. "This ends now." He rushed toward them. Before he could reach Kyle, another voice echoed through the tunnel. "Step away from them." "Matt." He had entered through the greenhouse access exactly as he predicted. Markham froze. "You." Matt stepped forward. "It's over." For several long seconds, neither man moved. Then Markham lunged. Matt intercepted him before he could reach Diane. The two men crashed into the tunnel wall as Victor's security team rushed in behind them. Within moments, Markham was restrained. The nightmare was finally over. Outside, emergency vehicles filled the estate. Jack embraced Diane with tears in his eyes. Kyle simply stood there, exhausted but relieved. Victor quietly thanked the security team before turning toward Matt. "You had a choice tonight." Matt nodded. "I know. You could have disappeared." "I almost did." Victor looked directly into his eyes. "But you came back." Matt didn't answer. He simply watched as Diane reunited with her family. Across the property, Nick finally arrived. He found Victor standing beside one of the security vehicles. So Matt wasn't lying. Victor folded his arms. "No." Nick looked toward Matt helping paramedics. "I judged him too quickly." "Maybe," Victor replied. "But trust isn't built in one night." The following morning, Genoa City slowly began returning to normal. Diane was finally home. Kyle's courage had saved his mother. Jack realized just how close he had come to losing both of them. Nikki continued recovering at the hospital, grateful for another chance with her family. Nate couldn't stop thinking about Stephanie's offer to return to surgery, wondering whether his greatest chapter might still lie ahead. Cane quietly questioned why someone had tried so hard to manipulate events around him. And Victor remained convinced that even though one crisis had ended, Another was only beginning. Finally, Phyllis received an unexpected knock at her hotel suite. She opened the door. Matt stood there. His bruises from the fight with Nick were still visible. So Phyllis said softly, "Are you finally going to tell me the truth?" Matt took a deep breath. No more secrets. He explained everything, from Victor asking him to watch Cane, to the messages that drew him to Markham's estate, and how he had chosen to save Kyle and Diane instead of protecting himself. When he finished, neither of them spoke for several moments. Then Phyllis smiled faintly. "You finally trusted me. I should have done it from the beginning." She stepped closer. "I don't know where this relationship is going." Matt nodded. "Neither do I. But if we're going to find out..." She reached for his hand. "We do it without lies." As they walked out together, neither noticed someone watching from across the street. Nick Newman. This time, however, he didn't interrupt. He simply watched in silence before turning away. For the first time, Nick realized that holding on to the past would only keep him from finding his own future. Yet in Genoa City, peace never lasts for long. Because hidden inside Victor Newman's office was a confidential file marked with one familiar name: Aristotle Dumas. Victor slowly opened the folder, stared at the photographs inside, and quietly whispered, "This game is far from over." And somewhere beyond Genoa City, an unseen figure smiled, already preparing the next move that would shake every powerful family to its core.